Hey guys, and welcome to Term 5 for Foundation Patreon. My name is Matthew Zickery, and I'm here today with John Park. And today for Term 5, we're going to bring you guys Sketching for Environments Part 2, Layout and Line Drawing. We hope you guys enjoyed the previous term and, had a fun time really exploring different compositions and shapes and, different spaces for these environments. Now, looking back at those as well as the feedback you received, we want you to pick minimum one of these, and we're going to start blowing this out into an actual line drawing. So prior to doing our line drawing, we need to do some prop exploration so we know what to include in our scene. And prior to doing those props, we need to do some basic research, and let's go ahead and just cover that right now for the very beginning of this video. And what does that mean? Well, does it mean going to handy dandy Google, looking up in some books, some magazines, just get your mind kind of wrapped into the idea of what you're going to design, because that's the most important part of this phase, the sketching for environments. You need to know your space, and there's a lot to it, everything that you're going to include. So what I would like to do is take a quick pause from here, and I'm going to start real quick by just starting with Google. And typically the way I like to work my research and reference gathering is I'll have a folder that I'm going to drag my images to, and I'll have my Explorer on my other screen. What's cool about Firefox is it lets you drag and drop any image right onto, your desktop or this folder. I think Chrome has a bug with it sometimes, so just, one thing to keep in mind. But as you saw for our line drawing, we're kind of doing this, Middle Eastern marketplace feel. So let's start just with that. Middle Eastern marketplace. And I'd like, like I told you before, I like to work very generic to the more specific. So looking at this, all this stuff gives me an idea. We have these bazaars, these ancient marketplaces, as well as just these different reference images. If you're on Google, you can go over the search tools, size, and actually specify a specific size right here, such as the 1024. If that's a little too small for you, then you can go ahead and work it larger, maybe 1600. But the reason why I prefer to work right around here is that I'm not actually using these images in my, painting right now. I'm just doing some basic reference gathering, and if you exclude those, you might actually lose amazing opportunities and stuff that you'll discover. So with that, we refined our search, and we can just browse through some of the things that we see come up. We got different items, different design languages and motifs for this culture. And it works too, me being Middle Eastern, I'm Egyptian, so I have, some extensive knowledge already on the country, just the general area. So wherever you're from, it's just an excuse to do some, additional research and just learn about your culture. It's really cool to see you guys bring out this specific information that no one else would have known about. Alright, so let's kind of take a look at just some of the items that we grabbed. So, okay, it's a marketplace. We know that we want different items in our scene. This does represent some of the marketplaces out there, just with all the hanging art, like objects that they're selling, such as the rugs and blankets. Let's look at these a little bit bigger. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and just move this to my other screen so we can keep this full size. But that's what I was talking about. If you open the image once, you can just drag and drop it right into there. Alright, so as you can see, just additional items, stuff hanging from the ceilings, and just be sure to analyze your scene. What kind of marketplace is this? Well, it looks like some type of interior mall. There's objects all over. We have different instruments, toys for kids, rugs, blankets, some, kitchen items. You can even look at the crowd in your picture and get an idea for where it's taking place. Most likely somewhere in the city, just based on the way that they're dressed. This guy looks like he's been shopping at like a Macy's or a Kohl's, wearing the most generic sweater I've seen. Alright, different patterns and designs. It's always good to have for these Persian carpets. Additional wall elements. And I like to have my reference library huge, because it's better to overshoot and have too many than to pause mid-drawing or mid-thought and have to go find more stuff. That's always such a pain. This is pretty cool. I just like the overall, you know, shape language and design that they're doing for this table. And this would be great for drawing an exterior view, as well as just getting acquainted with some of the materials that they're using. Obviously, these type of bricks would give off a way different vibe than if we cover the whole entire place with gold. So what's cool now is we can take a look at some of the reference that we just looked up. Just some of the stuff that we saved. And we can just start building off of it. So for example, what if we do Middle Eastern table? Dude, look at that. You know, I wasn't even thinking about the table designs. And just because of our reference and our research, we can now go ahead and pop some of these open and get an idea for just different designs that they'd use. Different decorative elements, different ways that the tables are, you know, built. They're not just 4 legs in the table, so just different construction methods that we can keep in mind. These are pretty cool. Even that is awesome. I actually do want that in my house. But you see what I'm saying? It's like all of this, it's supposed to just kind of turn into this network of ideas, and the beauty of it is you want to get lost in this process. You want to go ahead and just search now camel table, or you know, just like even this kind of stuff too, these different angles and shots and just the composition itself. This is this kind of stuff that you won't be able to find just based on your imagination. One thing that a good friend of mine taught me, Jose Daniel, was that you can't impress yourself with what you already know. And that really stuck with me because it just showed me that I shouldn't be trying to invent this stuff. You really should just go to see what's out there, have a spark and of an idea, and now go ahead and translate that back into your drawing or your painting. So I'm going to save that too. So that's kind of what we want you guys to take with this. It's good to keep in mind your, let me get just a Word doc here. Good things to keep in mind is composition, your perspective, of course, your research, which is going to uncover or account for your theming, location. I obviously cannot spell theming nor perspective. And your time place. And the reason why that's important is because Egypt back in, 22 AD looks way different than what it does now in 2015. Same thing with America just 300 years ago. And when you get specific with each of these, now you know exactly what to research. That'll just be really, really insightful for doing your theming. So go ahead and just do all of that basic reference and research gathering, and we'll keep adding on to this list, and we'll just build up from there. So once you've completed your reference gathering, let's go ahead and start extracting some props. And I'll go ahead and switch over to the camera now. Thanks. Okay guys, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to quickly draw, a prop for you guys real quick. So what I'm going to do is, based on some of the reference I was looking at, I'm actually going to draw a table that can kind of belong in this culture, this Middle Eastern era that we're looking at for this marketplace. And the reason why I chose a table is I wanted to show you guys just something simple and easy to dissect. So, we're not trying to go all crazy and, do human anatomy over here. We just want to do something understandable that we can break down. So as you could tell, I cheated. I took out the Copic marker. I think that's a Copic W1. It's a warm one. Might have been a neutral. But basically, I'm just drawing out this box here. And what you can do is just establish your overall geometry. That right there is the basis for my entire table. So here's the Copic again. And the reason why I use this is I am not as confident with others with the pen. So I kind of, just get in my base with this marker. It just really helps me visualize what I want to see on paper. And I'd highly recommend this. Some think it's a crutch, but you know what? If it produces a better result, that's all that matters. So here we have the same box. And just with that foundation laid in, we can go ahead and kind of cut away at it. So as you saw right there, I'm converting the top portion of this box into, the tabletop. And what's cool too is because we have that marker underlay, we can just hit these lines with, a confident single stroke. Just bringing on the legs. It's good to determine the width of one of your legs, so then you can base the width for the remaining legs, of course. An old habit I used to have that just was killing me is I try and draw everything all at the same time. I'd do one stroke here and then go to another leg before I actually figure out how wide it is. And what you saw me just do right there is I took a piece of napkin and I just rolled my pen on it, which allows just some of the ink, the excess ink that was building on the nib, just to fall off. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and we're just going to draw out the same box that we have, trying to keep the same proportions. And this time we're just going to extract it even more. And what you saw me do right there is I actually put a little point on where I thought that portion of the box should go. What's good about this is when you turn your paper, you're no longer trying to figure out how far to draw out your box. You already eyeballed it, so now you can just connect the lines. So now I'm giving a little lip under the tabletop over here. I'm going to extract some legs underneath it. I established one width, and then we just went ahead and carried that over. And right now what you see me doing is I'm actually trying to carry on a certain line, like a measuring point. So that way we can put some design elements on this leg. Just like in the perspective chapter, if we put an X over our box, we can find the midpoint of it, which we can then extend and extract the midpoint on the sides. So this allows other things to happen, such as right now we're just kind of adding a tablecloth onto it, some decorative element. And obviously this video is sped up right here. This is only 200%. Figured it'd be way too boring to watch me do this multiple times. Cool, so now I have a more detailed marker lay-in. It's going to allow me to take this block in that we just established and actually refine it. So especially with the dynamic sketching series coming up, this is a perfect step-by-step on how else you can take step 2 and not only carve out, but build on top of, add geometry to it. So it's actually what I'm doing right now. I'm adding geometry on top of it, but you can think how else you can integrate that into the design of the table itself. This bowl is a circle, so it's an ellipse in perspective. Just adding some fruit in there. And this is all freehand too. I mean, if you want, you can get out your ruler, your ellipse guides, but the whole purpose of this is just to generate ideas of what to include in your environment. We're not trying to be the most precise draftman ever. This isn't like a car rendering that's going into production. This is just ideation for us. So when you're doing your props, you'd actually like to lay them out all on the page. And to get a nice layout, a cool trick that Nicholas Weiss taught me is you can actually take a very light pencil and kind of just ghost in how you want your page layout to be. so that way you can organize, a bigger section versus a smaller section, and, fill in the gaps. So then when you go and include your props, it's just going to be as easy as 1, 2, 3, how big a certain element will fit on your page. And, once again, that keys into the fact of presentation that we've been talking about since the very beginning. And don't be afraid to draw through right now. It's easy to get lost into the idea of wanting to have a clean drawing, so you'll only draw half of that line and then continue from the other side, but it's really easy to make the mistake and the line doesn't look like it's continuing. So right here we're just taking that leg that we established and we're just going to kind of build on top of it, looking at some of the reference I have. Kind of just make it a little bit more decorative so it's not just a piece of wood slapped on. These woodworkers actually took the time to do some design for this table. And this prop doesn't necessarily belong or have to belong in that marketplace, but it just gives you a nice ideation of what to include in there. So I flipped the paper around for that ellipse. It's typically easier to do an arc on top instead of trying to do it underhand. Overhand's much easier. Keep wiping my ink on that paper over there. And I'm not trying to fall into my old habits. I'm trying to fully establish the single leg so that way I'm just repeating it on the other sections. I'm not blocking all the legs in and then pushing the geometry out and then adding the ellipses all at the same time. It's not too efficient because your design will not benefit as much. Alright, so now that we have that language established, I'm just going to kind of take a better guess for where this piece sits. And you can see now why research is very important. I'd never have came up with this leg design on my own without looking at some of the stuff we were looking at. Even when just looking through some of the other photos, seeing the way the tablecloth was sitting over the table in this very organized fashion just really helped kind of give the idea that this is a nice clean area that someone organized. It wasn't just slapped together. And that has a lot to do with the story you're trying to tell. Maybe the marketplace we're designing is going to be very neat. Maybe this person's house that lives over here is someone that actually cares for the guests that are going to be coming in. Or maybe vice versa. Maybe we wanted it to be very messy. There's banana peels all over, pieces of apple, plates broken. Definitely have fun with it. So we're just extending that design over once again. And you can see that the proportions don't entirely match up on these legs, and it's okay. It's just ideation drawing. This is all just stuff that's going to go into our final line drawing, just so we know what we want to include, so we're not stuck with these 4 walls that we just built in perspective, not knowing what to include in them. As Scott Robertson says, always take it one step at a time. Design out what you're going to include in your environment. If you need to, you can even do it in side view, just so you have an idea. That way you're not even worrying about perspective. As you can see here, I just kept everything in the top 3/4 down view, which I find is very informational, especially in production. This kind of stuff can be handed off to a modeler and they'll know exactly what's going on. And just for presentation's sake, I'm working on the front part of this bowl, as well as trying to get the overall overlaps before I start drawing in the back stuff. So you could tell those bananas that were back there were drawn in first. That way I don't go too heavy with a line or darken the lips behind it. And that's kind of the same thing with the table. I drew the front section first and I still haven't even touched the back section. Giving it a little bit of a thickness. We don't want this bowl to be paper thin. Just adding a little plate behind it. And just keep building. You know, this is an additive process. And typically too, when it comes to adding any interior detail and wanting to divide something up into even increments, essentially what's easiest to do, that I think I'm actually going to do right here, is, actually it's going to come when I further start detailing out this piece, is I like to divide up my piece into the middle. And what I mean by that is you can actually take a station point and kind of figure out where the middle is, and then the middle of that, and just keep dividing it. So that way you're not trying to figure out these increments. Just measuring out some points right now. In this kind of perspective, like drafting method requires for that type of measuring. You know, if you're going for like a looser just ideation, which there's no problem at all, you can go ahead and just eyeball it. But since I'm going for something very geometric and I want to get that really, like, you know, that stands to this prop basically, I'm actually going to take the time and make my little indication marks, connect the dots. My awesome head in the frame. Good little balding going on. That is awesome. So just moving forward, if you kind of take a look at the overall page, well, the overall prop, you could see that we started with the big, and then we're moving to the medium, and now I'm adding in the small. I'm adding in the actual details. You can think of big as actual geometry. Consider small as being, you know, just different breakups in the actual geometry itself, in the shape. And obviously that can be, you can consider medium as actual breakups in the shape, you know, such as the leg and whatnot. And small is typically just going to be this little silhouette changes, interior detail on objects, stuff that isn't really making too much of an impact. And what I mean by that is, if you took what we had just a few minutes ago, and if you referred back to our very first term, the silhouette design, and we compared it to right now, there wouldn't be much of a difference, if any actually. Just a little bit of these frayings of the strings down, but that'd be it. Everything else is essentially the same. So going back to those terms, it just really, you know, plays on the fact of the big, medium, small design language. So right there is kind of what I was talking about before, how I put that middle detail in first right now, and I'm going halfway in between them, halfway in between the other side. That way I get more of an even spacing in this kind of grid format. As far as materials, over here I'm using the Zebra Rubber 80, I believe it is. It's a pretty nice pen. It gets really nice thick to thin lines. And it also doesn't go too dark too fast, so people like me that don't have amazing pen control can control it much more easy. Right there, I measured out the middle, went halfway, and just keep going halfway in between them. Thank you, James, for teaching me this. James Pack. And sorry I keep emphasizing that. This is just something that like really helped me out with this kind of stuff. Anything that was repetitive. You know, if you're adding in a wooden fence, interior detail here, if you're doing windows on an airplane, it's all the same thing, and it's all spacing that really matters. So also when it comes to our line drawing, if you noticed, John went ahead and, wow, I'm really blocking the frame. Sorry guys, but John went ahead and he actually did an interior. And the reason why we did that is it's much easier to understand and kind of creep into environments by designing out interiors. And it's also a little more challenging because you have to obey the rules of, you know, perspective and just the kind of layout that we're doing. And the reason why I say that is sometimes in exteriors you can kind of cheat it. You can, you know, add in a lot more organics, while these interiors, they're typically rooms, they're blocked out in a certain way. Whether the floor format is, you know, rectangular, circular, it doesn't really matter. There is usually a layout to it. And the reason why that makes it easier is you're working with smaller objects. You have more of an understanding of the kind of layout that you're doing. It also makes it pretty easy to theme because set dressing wise, you're just adding in elements that all kind of fit each other. So when you did your research, adding in any of those props into a room you design from any camera angle, just 4 walls, it'll look like a unified look. In exteriors, there's also the same thing, but it just makes it difficult because typically you're not working with such small elements. And then what makes it more difficult is you have to, it just restricts you as far as, it just gives you rules you have to follow. You need to make sure that your scaling is up to par, that any object is the correct scale compared to a human. You know, any doors would make sense for a human to walk through it. Such as this table, you can't go ahead and add a 10-foot chair next to it, or just something out of proportion. It'll look really weird. And if you really want to get into it, you can think Sid Meat status and understand that, like, if you have a door with certain elements in there, that element had to get through the door somehow. And that's real design, where, you know, back when he was designing interiors of airplanes and just adding in any element, you really had to consider that stuff because you couldn't just break the airplane apart. Right here you kind of see some of I brought out the Hi-Tech C pen. It's, I believe, Pilot. Yeah, it's a Japanese ink. And what's really nice is it gives some really nice line weight to it, and it's a consistent line. Then you have the Zebra Rubber 80, which can go from thick to thin pretty easy. So I'm using this Hi-Tech just to do some basic outlines, kind of pop some forms in front of others. And where I'm doing this is any area of overlap. So obviously I'm going to hit the back end of my table, your entire silhouette essentially. And then these areas where items are overlapping others, such as right there, the tablecloth. Just popping a little bit more. And this just helps for the presentation. So if any item is in front of another one, you can give it a little bit thicker of a line weight than the one underneath it. It doesn't mean go crazy and give everything a number 3 outline, but it just helps for clarification if you can kind of pronounce some key essentials. You know, I hope you guys find this helpful. And just keep in mind that those first 2 steps were some of the most important ones. So take a look at objects around you and try to dissect them. You know, if you see a bottle, it's, you know, you can break it down into a cylinder with a cone on top. If you see some type of bowl, it's going to be a sphere just sliced through the middle. You know, a table is just a block. A hookah would just be a series of spheres and cylinders all piled on top of each other. You know, that kind of concave outwards and inwards in different directions. So if you know those basic shapes, the cube, the sphere, the cylinder, the cone, you can make anything. Anything that exists, you can draw it if you're able to dissect those down. Just adding in a few final refinement passes right here. I just brought a note card just to make sure the ink was flowing, so it didn't just give me a solid dark line right away. It's always nice to have scrap paper around, very similar to how a painter would have, you know, extra illustration board around. So there you have it. That essentially covers a simple prop drawing. And go ahead and just, have fun with this. You'll have the assignment on the end of how much quantity you want to do, or we would like you to do at least. But the more exploration, the better. And those first two steps, the block-in and the carve-out, are really the essential part of this. Anyone can come in and just refine, like what I'm doing right here. This is where you play music, just have fun. You can even hop on the phone, talk to people, and just doodle away. But this part right here, thinking through the block-in, how it carves out, coming all the way down to that refinement phase. Alright, thanks again. I'm going to pass it on to John now, who's going to go ahead and step you guys through the demo. Thank you guys.
Hey guys, welcome back. This is term 5, and now we're going to be doing the finalized line drawing. Again, for today, I'm going to be using the Zebra Rubber 80. This was from the last demo from term 4, and for this week, I'm going to just kind of build on top of what we did. So Matt basically kind of gave you guys a rundown in terms of research, what kind of materials to look for, and how to start preparing to do a larger and more complex scene. What I'm going to kind of show you guys here is, before we get into doing the complex scene right away, why don't we just start off with just a simple shot here to kind of prep before we do the finalized drawing. So what I'm thinking for this is more of like a, again, we're going to go with kind of the marketplace theme here. I'm thinking about an interior. And good old vanishing points in our guidelines. And what I'm thinking here is, it might be cool to have maybe some sort of kind of interior exterior kind of vibe to it. So it's like an exterior, but it has that interior feel just by the amount of stuff crowding it. So again, we can start off with very basic boxes, but I just kind of like to stack the scene a little bit. We're going to kind of build on this, and I'm literally thinking about just objects in here. And this here, I'm just going to represent it, and notice how gestural and quick, because again, this is something that I just want to really get a good feeling for this design and this space. And a lot of this stuff, we kind of did a pre-prep based on the research and some of the cool sketches that Matt demoed on just different props and variety. But before we go and start placing them, I just want to see what the general layout can look like. And maybe even there's stuff hanging from the roof here, or from the ceiling. Maybe there's scaffolding and all this stuff on top, but I'm just kind of quickly prepping what this thing can look like. And you actually want to put in all of your ideas here at this phase. Even if it's something really, if you're not really too sure, if whether it's gonna look good. You know, it's like just test it out in this like sketch phase. You know, maybe it's like, oh, maybe it might be cool to have a dude here, some merchant, like selling stuff, or like other people and characters and stuff like that here wheeling and dealing like illegal shit, you know? Maybe this is like one of those crazy black markets where they have like, you know, illegal engine parts or weapons or whatever it is. But for the most part, I just want to get a good feeling of the general space. So these comps are actually really good just to figure out the general layout and flow of the space. You know, like I would recommend just doing several of these types of drawings, you know, just to kind of see which one you want to settle on. Let's just do another one real quick up here. And for this one, let's actually, I'm going to use the same horizon line. I'm going to call this A and B. And in this horizon line, use the same vanishing point. Let's just come up with a slightly different concept. Okay. Maybe in this one I can have a pillar or a larger object here, and maybe some sort of like awning or something. Just to make this a little bit more interesting. And maybe like here, this guy sells like different objects. It kind of varies, you know? Maybe there's like a little hookah thing. And then maybe here it's like there's like another upper floor or something. And this is the kind of thing that, you know, I really enjoy the design process or the exploration process at this phase, is because, you know, if your idea or your concept doesn't look cool as a small thumbnail, your overall shot's actually not going to look cool. You know, so really trying to figure out what this stuff looks like at this phase is actually more fun to me than doing the final illustration, to be honest, because it's just really figuring out, like, you know, all the cool ideas, you know, what makes the space look cool in terms of composition, but just, you know, about like placement ideas, you know, the content that's in here. The arrangement of objects. So there we go. We have like two different versions, right? One is like looking down the hallway. This is looking down the hallway, but it's more favoring kind of the left side. It's very heavy on the left side. This is more like equal. We're just kind of diving in. So this is the stuff that I would highly encourage you guys to explore. mark this off here. I remember back in school, me and the classmates and I, we'd have to do hundreds of these, you know, in a week. And it was crazy, right? Because it's a lot of drawing. But you know, by the time we were drawing, like on our 20th one, you get so fast at doing this stuff, and you actually enjoy kind of coming up with a lot of different ideas from this. Alright, so I'm probably gonna most likely go with this setup here. I think this is a cooler shot. I'm gonna just do a larger drawing right down here below, and for those of you that want to do a larger frame, you can do that by choosing a larger piece of paper, but for the most part I'm just gonna do it directly below here. Want to make sure that it's relatively straight, and border off here. So this stuff, you don't feel like obligated to do your borders here by hand, because you want this stuff to be pretty precise, especially for a larger format drawing like this. Okay, so here let's just go ahead and plot in our lines here. So my horizon line is more or less going to be about yay high. I'm going to draw really lightly, actually. My vanishing point is going to be not completely center, but it's going to be more favoring towards the right. So I'm going to go maybe about a third of the way. So if this is half, and we were to divide this in thirds, I'll probably go like a third of the way. No particular reason, I just feel that it creates a nicer, kind of slightly dynamic angle, so it's not directly in the center. Because if it's in the center, then you get a bit of a a symmetrical vibe to the shot. I'm going to draw in my vanishing lines here. Okay, just enough to kind of get us to a good point. Okay. Alright, now I'm going to start plotting in just my secondary vanishing point. Again, we talked about earlier in the previous term how if this is our horizon line and it's straight, then it's going to converge. So imagine our lines, it's going to do something like this. So I can actually take my ruler here and I can point it off to the side, and I can just anchor it out just like this, and they'll give us a nice kind of range of converging lines. I'm just going to give it just a couple of lines, not too much, because there's one thing about doing these layout drawings is really overcrowding it with your guidelines. It gets pretty overwhelming, and like you don't want to have a drawing where all you have are nothing but guidelines everywhere, because you don't know where to put the detail. Like, what the hell am I looking at? Right? Just, it's like a matrix or something. I know, sometimes this shit is easier in Photoshop. It really is. There's times when I'm like, oh my gosh, this would have taken me like 2 seconds in Photoshop. But there's something to it when you're drawing, physically. It's very tangible. There's like tact to it, So no rules against this. If you guys want to do this stuff digitally, you may do so. If you want to do it traditionally, it's That's also good too. There's like pros and cons to everything. Alright, well, since I have this now, I'm going to place in just kind of my pillar here. So I'm thinking of something here. I'm actually going to draw this thing in fairly lightly. And I'm probably going to draw in all of my, majority of my block out. It's going to be pretty light because I want to save enough of the line real estate to put in detail. So I'm just thinking about stuff that we can place here. Maybe some sort of like table, but I'm going to represent it as a box. Maybe another table here that comes out. Just right, crops right into frame. Okay, here, I'm just thinking about some like divisions here. Just like something to kind of separate the different tiers, or like kind of the shelf here. You gotta watch out for these little glops here. Putting some shelves there. If there's anything that comes to mind, you know, feel free to box it in, or you can lightly draw in some stuff. Okay, I'm thinking about like some sort of stylized pillar of some sort. Maybe this has maybe like a poster or something here, so I'm just kind of blocking that in as well. Maybe this thing, we have another pillar, this rectangular like pillar way back here. I hope most of you guys own a ruler, so I know this shit's old school. Everything's like Photoshop. Where's a ruler? What the hell? Okay, so maybe here like we have these like little diagonal bars on my sketch. Whoops. Here I'm thinking like it might be neat to have some sort of like beam or something here. So maybe it's like it is kind of that awning or something structural that's holding this thing up. Maybe it's a sign or something. So I can have kind of this more like diagonal like structure. Maybe that's what this is. So we're just building this stuff up. And I'm keeping it minimal in the sense that like no detail. It's just the major elements. Even here, maybe like we had that vase in the corner here of that sketch. I can kind of block that in. And maybe there's probably like smaller vases and stuff like that. So details, all that stuff, we can build that up. Just put in exactly what you need to get this drawing going. Okay, so for the stairway, I'm thinking it might be cool to have like maybe there's a stairway here. And imagining it kind of being on a higher deck or something. So the way I like to do stairs is I just draw a triangle first. And with that triangle, will give you kind of the nice angle of stairs. And then from here, we can plot out how many stairs you want. We can say 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. So what we do here, I just use the horizon, the vanishing point, to block out each of my steps. And with each step, I can put like a little plank of wood that represents those steps. This is probably on a higher deck, so I'm gonna go ahead and draw a deck like structure there. And then maybe just some ideas for, they might have some more stuff here inside of this deck, boxes and like just more cargo and stuff like that, shit that they've just stored over the years, you know. Because that's like one thing about these types of like marketplaces is that, you know, space is really scarce, so they're going to utilize the shit out of everything. Okay, so I'm thinking maybe it might be cool to have like some sort of, you know, just some more structures here. Maybe some sort of opening. This is obviously a deck, but there's clearly like these little beams here. And in here we're going to place in kind of that large structure. I'm thinking maybe it's like some sort of boiler or something, or something cylindrical. And be sure to use your research, because at this point there's a lot of details and stuff like that that is going to help you to figure out where to place all your details here. I'm thinking maybe putting just another pillar back here or something, or maybe like you can put in like an architectural arch here. Some more stuff. And it's fun to like start imagining the space with like, you can just imagine like the crowded air, like things that they would hang from the top here, whether it's like meat or maybe it's like some items that you can buy. You know, whether it's food or whether it's like actual accessories or even like garments or stuff like that. That's actually really neat to see. And just even the way it might even be how it might be hanging from. You can get a lot of different ideas. And a lot of this stuff, guys, you know, don't feel like, you know, I'm coming up with this like completely on the top of my head. I'm actually using a little bit of research that I pulled. And Matt showed you guys like how to pull some of the photo reference and what to look for and how to actually use that accordingly. I'm even thinking like maybe even the ground. Has like some sort of rug or something. Okay, so you can see we're starting to really build this thing up. So we're using the sketch as kind of like our base foundation. Now at this point, if you want to start blocking in just kind of the general placement of your characters, like say for example here, just on the side, I always like to do just some quick sketches, okay, of like what those characters can be doing. Now they can be characters that are literally walking through the space. If you don't know, or if you're uncomfortable drawing characters, I highly recommend just pull some reference and actually figure out just some interesting poses that you can use. I've done a fair amount of just observational drawing, so a lot of this stuff I'm actually using from what I learned from memory, but at times if I'm trying to find a specific pose, then I'll actually use photo reference. And that photo reference will give me a good idea in terms of how the clothing is like and what the characters look like as they are dressed. I can even do just some other characters here. You guys can see as I zoom in. They're just little studies. It's really fun doing these because you kind of get the sense of like the type of people that you can populate the scene with. You know, and just kind of how to make this place come to life. Little dudes here. Maybe even like a character, like a merchant character, right? How do those merchant characters look? And again, keep in mind, like I'm doing all of these just through linear drawing, meaning like it's just all no shading. It's just all just kind of being described through line work. If I were to do a painting, then that'd be different. And here's kind of like a merchant or something. Maybe he's like wheeling and dealing or using something to kind of scoop inside of a pot. I don't know. It's kind of cheesy, but it's like ideas like this will give you a better configuration for like how to set up your scene, especially with like characters. Okay, so we got these three little dudes. Okay, and also like the way I like to do characters way in the distance, I'm probably not going to put as much emphasis on the character like detail. It's going to be more of like a indication. So the way I like to do that is indicate the head and just really the silhouette of the character. It's something like that. Something where we kind of understand the character, or we understand the proportion, whether it's like a skinny person or if it's like a big person, you know, or a person in like a larger garment or dress. We understand the basic structure or silhouette of the character. Okay, so that's kind of the way I like to do like distant characters. So going back to our drawing we have here. So what I'm gonna do is just putting in some of these characters. Maybe we can have this guy. I always like to have, if you guys notice, I always like to have multiple sheets underneath. It just creates kind of like a nice cushion here. But anyways, if I were to indicate this guy here, maybe he can be somewhere along the lines here or something. And generally what I like to do is, if this is our horizon line, then you can establish the height. Probably going to create the height of this character here. And as the character, as it goes away in perspective, I'm going to use that relative height to determine the height of other characters. So meaning, if my character is about this tall, let me zoom in here. If our character is about this tall, then I know for a fact that I can use this perspective to really figure out the height of this character here. If this character is at this relative distance, then I'm going to have a character that's going to be about this tall too. If there's a character that's standing here, then I'm going to use my horizon of my vanishing point to kind of project, to understand that, okay, I have a character that's going to be here, a head height of that. And it's easy for me to indicate the height of that character in the distance. And now we can really start to populate the scene. so forth. Alright, so let's get started on this drawing. Now we got all the elements in place. Now we can actually start to make this come to life. Okay, so I usually like to kind of pick one area, whether it's here or here, and just kind of make that my main focal point. So if this area is my focal point, then I'm going to put the most amount of attention here. And that's going to be through just putting detail. So I'm going to start off by actually establishing kind of all of the detail and all of the elements that go here. That can be in like the arrangement of items, foods, all that stuff. And feel free to take periodic breaks, you know, like, because I know this at this stage, it's like you want to be as delicate as you can, because you don't want to like completely mess up, right? But you want to be, you know, make sure that this stuff looks and feels pretty good. So if you guys need to, you know, definitely take the necessary breaks. Don't rush this part. And as Matt showed you guys, you know, be sure to just concept out just a couple of props, you know, drawings and stuff like that. You know, research anything and everything that you're unsure of, because that's going to really help with this set of set dressing, just to really get kind of that flavor of detail. All these objects here, just trying to get that to come to life. So that's what I'm doing. I'm actually treating everything just one by one. Let's zoom out just a little bit more. Let us know if you have any questions at this phase. You know, I know a lot of this stuff you guys are probably just watching in the comfort of your own home or studio, wherever you guys may be. But you know, Matt and I are both usually online. And for all of the patrons, feel free to email or ask away. Whatever is confusing to you. Okay, so let's start working on this section here. So what I'm thinking is like, I don't know, maybe some sort of like strange looking boiler thingamabobber with some packs of meat or something. Maybe this is where this guy's actually cooking something. I kind of messed up here, and I'm not too worried about like the face messing up there, just because, you know, if when I want to clean this up, I can most likely take this into Photoshop and just clean up that edge. Okay. Then let's just add more stuff, more boxes and other goodies. And I'm thinking like this might be like some sort of like large pot. And the way I like to come up with some of these textures is, you know, you can easily just find examples of that stuff, you know, through your research. There's tons of things like that. Because, you know, it's kind of like, how do you make pots and all this stuff look cool, right? It's kind of a silly thing to think about, but it's something to really consider. It's like, how do you make any of this stuff look interesting? Okay, what's great about some of the lines that we ghosted in, I can choose to keep that stuff very visible, or we can pull it back. It's really up to us. Maybe some more pots and pans back here. Just gonna put like a covering, like a mask or something on this guy's head, so it's like less distracting. And I have kind of like this concept of these like tarps and stuff kind of like back here. And maybe this is like different types of garments or even like fabric. That these merchants import in and sell. It's like totally bullshitting here, but I don't know. You have to make things look interesting, even if it's a small detail. If you don't make it, you know, even narratively interesting, then, you know, the whole space looks you know, not as believable or interesting to look at. Just put another little structure up here. And maybe here we have more items hanging. You can start to see that it's getting really dense with detail, right? But that's kind of it's kind of what we want to create, especially for this kind of design in this space. Now, I'm actually drawing with a relatively light line weight, so a lot of my lines here, you know, are kind of anywhere from this light to medium line weight. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm going to use my thicker line weight to outline. This is our thick line weight. And the reason being is that when we have just really light objects, one, it's easy for us to kind of sketch in our ideas, you know, whatever it may be, if it's like a box or something. But once we have our ideas, then it's easy for us to use the thick outline to basically punch out the object. So that we can really see how that shows. But if I do it everywhere, you know, it starts to get really cartoony. So I want to be selective with where I punch up the line weight here. Okay? So that's what I'm doing. That's what's going on here. Is that all of this information is going to be relatively on the lighter side. And it's not until I want to beef up the lines is where we're going to really start to see which objects are in front versus what's in back, which objects are grouped together. Grouping meaning, you know, there's a clear understanding of objects that are cluttered together, like that's a group, this is a group. Put in another pillar here. With more people way back in the distance. And these people can just be kind of lightly indicated. Just like that. So you can really see that the scene is actually just getting more and more crowded and dense, right? It's probably to the point where you're like, holy shit, it's a little too dense. But it's okay. You have like a vase. And a lot of this stuff here, I'm going to use as a foreground element. Just to say, okay, there's clearly some pots and pans and all that stuff. keep using the perspective grid here to just kind of indicate maybe just some more structures in the distance. But they're gonna be more or less like shapes. Nothing too specific, because again, I don't want it to compete with all of our elements here. I just want it to be more just an indication of things. Even the floor here, I can imagine, you know, different ranges of carpet or cardboard, whatever it is that's going to make up the floor. And we can even rotate some of this stuff. Rotate kind of the carpet lining here. And maybe just this base here. And I love doing this kind of stuff because, you know, I know I talked about illustrating, but there's something about just creating an environment where you can start to really believe that it exists, because you can actually start to get lost in it, you know. And lost is actually, in what I mean is actually, it's a good thing, because you start to just kind of visually daydream. You're like, oh shoot, what if I went here and there, and your brain actually likes to kind of wander around. Maybe there's like some sort of large element up here that's being held up. Maybe it's like a large statue or something that we just kind of get a glimpse of, like way in the distance. And this character, and this is where, you know, I'm going to use the thicker outline to really pop this character off the background. Notice how we can actually get just a little bit more punch in this character. And I'm not necessarily shading the clothing, I just want to pop out certain elements so it's clear. Okay, we're getting close to done here. I just gotta fill in some of these other extra bits. It's probably not going to be as detailed because, again, I want most of my attention here, just the most amount of contrast. And the reason being is that, you know, I want a lot of the interest to be there. Because the thing about these types of drawings is that, you know, you want to have a nice balance, but you don't want it to be too overly descriptive or too even everywhere, because then it becomes just a cluster of detail, and it can be really overwhelming. So now I'm starting to go in with just some of my more thicker line weight to pull out just some really clearly defined edges. So that we can understand just structurally what's in front versus what's behind. And as it gets away from us, the lines are going to get a little bit lighter. Thinking this can be like some sort of large device. Maybe it's like an engine, or I have no idea what this is. Okay, so here is my foreground. So I'm clearly going to pop this out with a thicker line weight. I'm just going to go in here and really start to punch out some of these elements here, just so that they have a little bit more visual weight to them, so that that's clearly in front of that guy. So I'm going to punch out the lines there. Just add a little bit more texture. Even like these things, the undersides of these things, having just a little bit more line weight to visually So let us know if you have any questions at this stage. I know this is definitely a little bit more, it's a lot more advanced from what we've shown you guys before. But feel free to ask questions and post up questions on the blog. We'll do our best to kind of get those answered. If you're watching this at a different time and you're not a part of the blog, feel free to email us. Email me or Matt Zickery. I'm at jparked, brainstormjparked@gmail.com. And you can email us your questions. Okay. So at this phase, I will probably end up wanting to spend like an extra hour or two, probably do more detail. But at this stage, I mean, it's pretty good for me to consider this a good enough layout drawing to start painting on top of, or even handing over to someone to kind of build, because it has all the right information. It has basically everything that we need to kind of go off of. Just even some of the carpet, I'm probably gonna slightly punch up just to show a little bit more. And even these things here. I know this stuff can get pretty overwhelming quick. Your brain is just trying to find its place. You're like, what the hell am I supposed to focus on next? But once you've solidified a good focal point, which is all this stuff, you know how to kind of prioritize the amount of energy and attention to detail, basically. Because I don't want to just make everything as detailed and textural as the left side, because this is my focal area. So I want to save as much of it for this section as possible. Okay. Okay, so that pretty much concludes this demo. I hope this was helpful to you guys. the most important takeaway from a demo like this, or from this type of drawing, is really the process here. And the process is understanding how to just do basic layout comps and taking it to more finished rendering. Again, for you guys, when you guys are doing your assignment and your homework, please take your time on this stuff. The only reason why we kept our demos anywhere from 1 to 3 hours is that we want to ensure that you don't fall asleep. I mean, obviously a lot of this stuff can be very long, but it'll give you a good starting point in terms of what to do and how to get to this point. So thank you again for joining us in Term 5, and we'll see you next time.
Okay guys, we hope you enjoyed today's lecture and demo. For the assignment now, we want you guys to go ahead and do a minimum of 1 page of props as well as another page for your final environment line drawing. Just remember, prior to this, you need to be able to go ahead and actually do your thorough research so you know what you're drawing in your props as well as your environments. Thanks again for sticking this through, and we look forward to seeing your work on the blog. See you guys next time.